In the last 72 hours, however, we have received confirmation of an additional 8 cases who have tested positive for coronavirus. This now brings the total number of those who have tested positive to 15. Out of the latest 8 cases, 5 are Kenyans and 3 are foreign nationals. The foreign nationals are 2 French people and 1 Mexican. All the 8 are imported cases from Europe and America. The ages are between the age of 20 for the youngest and 57 years for the oldest. All the 8 came through the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport between the 4th of March and the 17th of March. And they all have been isolated at various facilities and are being monitored by our teams. We are tracing 363 persons who had come into contact with these patients. So far, we have also an additional 3 people waiting processing at Bagathi Hospital. The rest have been processed and discharged. All the patients, except the one who is at the coast at Msambweni, are all in stable condition. The government is organizing to having the patient in Msambweni airlifted to Nairobi for further treatment. As I mentioned on Friday last week, our actions continue to be guided by the trends that we have observed in other countries. Evidence from other countries indicate that the number of infected persons increases dramatically in the second week following confirmation of the first case. I did further indicate that these coming 2 weeks are extremely critical for this country as we seek to contain the outbreak. We remain focused on emphasizing high levels of hygiene and the maintaining of social distance as the most effective containment measures. The government has, in the past few weeks, announced various measures that are aimed at containing this virus. However, much to our disappointment, we have noticed that majority of our people have continued to ignore these measures and are behaving as if it is business as usual. As I cautioned last week, this disease is not a joke. Kenyans must treat this matter with the seriousness it deserves by adjusting and changing their lifestyles. If we continue to behave normally, this disease will treat us abnormally. All international flights are suspended effective Wednesday, the 25th at midnight. The only exception to this rule are cargo flights whose crew must observe strict guidelines. Those coming into the country between now and Wednesday may they be Kenyans or foreigners, will undergo mandatory quarantine at a government-designated facility at their own expense. Countries wishing to evacuate their nationals must make their arrangements to do so within this period. Kenyans who are currently in foreign countries and will not have come back within the said period are advised to observe the guidelines issued in the respective countries wherever they are. Whereas we had allowed Kenyans and foreigners with valid residence permits to come into the country, we have observed that there are those who are not observing self-quarantine protocol. Consequently, NAC has decided that all persons who violate the self-quarantine requirement will be forcibly quarantined for a full 14 days at their cost, and thereafter arrested and charged in accordance with the Public Health Act. And I would like to add here that this will apply to a senior government official in Kilifi who defied and refused to self-quarantine, who is now being forcibly quarantined in a facility, and upon the completion of the period given by our health authorities, the person, the official, will be charged in a court of law. And this will be followed by each and every person who violate this. I would like to urge, particularly those students traveling from the UK, traveling from the US and other countries, to observe this rule very strictly, and it will be enforced. And further, I would like to appeal to the younger people who are coming not to be close whatsoever to the older persons, because as has been shown by statistical evidence elsewhere, as soon as the young people come into close proximity with older people, the older people begin to die. So even as we talk about quarantining and we talk about distancing, it is important for people to remain alive to the fact that the older people are a lot more vulnerable. Effective midnight tonight, all bars will remain closed until further notice. Restaurants are to remain open, but only for purposes of facilitating takeaway services. This is meant to secure the social distance requirement, noting that the increased risk of transmission that those facilities can cause. Further, in order to give effect to the social distance requirement in public transport sector, all public service vehicles must adhere to the directive issued on Friday, March the 20th, failure to which the respective SACCO licenses will be revoked. The Inspector General of Police, who is present with us here today, has been directed to enforce this directive. Having noted the non-compliance of individuals, may they be in religious organizations, may they be in other social gatherings, as issued on the 20th of March, the NAC has directed the suspension of all church, mosques, funerals, and other social gatherings, and funerals are restricted to immediate family members only.
The national government administration officers are hereby directed that moving forward, there will be no churches that will be open, they'll shut them. And if you are found with an open church in your area of jurisdiction, disciplinary action will be taken against you. There will be no gathering in mosques, in shrines, and in all places of worship. Like Waziri has said, all bars will remain closed from today midnight. Therefore, together with the National Police Service, the National Government Administration officers are hereby directed to ensure that that directive is complied with, and you will be punished if it's found that in your area of jurisdiction there are those entertainment spots, bars that are open. And we will, using our command center that we have opened here, be doing monitoring of compliance to these directives. And the National Government Administration officers further are directed to ensure that funerals are only attended by immediate family members who do not exceed 15 in number. And we shall enforce this without mercy. We also have directed them that they should not allow weddings, they should not allow merry-go-rounds, they should not allow birthday parties, they should not allow disco matangas, and all these social gatherings that when the minister talks of social gathering, as long as he hasn't mentioned it by name, we try to hide around it. So we are here as the Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government directing our officers to ensure moving forward that personal responsibility will be taken by them when there is violation of any of these directives. And because one of the other directives touches on the transport sector, where the enforcement is both by the National Transport and Safety Authority and the National Police Service.
Duty of the National Police Service is enforcement of the laws and regulation. And to this aspect, National Police Service will start enforcing the Public Health Act. I'm giving direction to all the National Police Service officers. One, to start by this midnight enforcing the closure of the bars from the midnight. Secondly, to start enforcing the regulations of the matatus, observing the outlined regulations, observing distance in the matatus, the numbers of passengers in the matatus, and the health standard. We are also going to enforce and support the National Government Administration officers in enforcing all the social gathering and public gathering which have been outlined, that no social gathering, wedding, funerals, disco matangas, churches, and others which have been mentioned here.
County emergency response teams have been formed, co-chaired by the county governors and the county commissioners. The purpose of this committee is to domesticate and adapt the national coronavirus emergency response team, which is here. And I am sure the message is now very clear that the government has heightened the level of caution, and it has moved from advisory to enforcement. And therefore it is important, number one, that all governors and all leaders in the counties take this message to the people, that people should stay home. We have examples of countries that have failed to follow the advice of their government, and today the explosion is such that their facilities, however advanced those countries are, their facilities can no longer sustain the flow of patients, and the deaths are becoming too high, as you have already been told. 789 people died in 24 hours in Italy. That should be a lesson and a message. We should be a learning nation. We must learn and adapt and be able to take care of ourselves, especially our mothers, our grandmothers, grandfathers. And I would like to emphasize, this disease is not only for elderly, it affects everybody. But the problem is, the young people will be the distributors, and therefore you should not feel safe. You are the one, the young people are the ones distributing. Therefore, we would like this message to be sent to the counties by the county government, the governors, the CECs, even the members of parliament, and all leaders now should provide leadership at the county level and enforce, or rather talk more, so that the enforcement part is done by the national government, and we keep telling our people exactly what to do, and the message is stay home.